welcome to today's conversation, the original podcast series from Oktopost. The discussion today, I'm actually joined by Ambassador Ido Aharoni, a member of the APCO Worldwide International Advisory Council and a global distinguished professor with the New York University. Ambassador Aharoni is a 25-year veteran of the Israeli Foreign Service, a public diplomacy specialist, which is great in this time, and also the founder of Brand Israel program, a well-known national branding practitioner. Welcome to the conversation, Ambassador. Or can I call you Ido?
Please do. I was born Ido and I will die Ido.
You actually, so I believe, I've done a little bit of research, and you actually are the longest serving, or were the longest serving consulate-general out in New York and the tri-state area. 6 years, I believe it was, overseeing the operations of Israel's largest diplomatic mission anywhere in the world, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Excellent. So we are very, very honoured to have you, sir. So, Ido, welcome to the conversation. Look, during this podcast episode, we want to talk about the global travel industry, certainly one of the hardest hit during this current pandemic. So given your unique placed knowledge of national branding, international diplomacy, and indeed worldwide travel, what should local and national decision makers do to help the tourist industry start to recover?
The first thing they have to do is domestic. The second thing they have to do is incentivize tourism. And the third thing they need to do is help local, especially small businesses like bed and breakfasts, with their marketing efforts. One of the biggest barriers for small businesses in the travel industry is lack of access to the big marketing platform because it's very costly. And of course, when Airbnb came into the picture, it became even more difficult for private owners of bed and breakfasts to develop their own brand. Airbnb was all-encompassing. And now governments need to help their small businesses build their own brand. And so rely on domestic travel, heavily incentivize the industry, and then help them with their marketing efforts. That's what they need to do in the immediate term.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, look, we've all been weeks and months in isolation. Yeah, it's created unprecedented digital reality, and most of us are more digitally connected now than we've ever been at any point in our life. I've got a 93-year-old grandmother who hasn't been out of bed, believe it or not, since February of 2019. And she's certainly not of a generation that would normally be technically or digitally connected. But I'm even having WhatsApp video calls with her on a weekly basis just to let her know that people are there. Now, obviously, these advancements in technology bring opportunities for some, and bring threats for others, or opportunities and threats for all of us. So putting your marketer's hat on for me, Ido, what are some of the opportunities that are being or will be presented to B2B marketers off of the back of this new digital connection?
So first of all, obviously, is the tremendous amount of information that can be cropped by businesses. And the purpose of trying to analyze all this information will be obviously to be able to predict the behavior of the consumer. And so the whole idea of predictive segmentation is going to be extremely rejuvenated, believe it or not, by the crisis, and especially one particular area, which is predictive medicine. Because if there's one thing that we learned from COVID-19 is that medical treatment has to be customized and has to be entities, healthcare systems, and even, it would have an impact on the travel industry because we will have to redefine the very basic term of what it means to be safe. This will have to be internationally recognized, and there will have to be an international standard, just like there is one when it comes to air travel safety. And when you go through the airport, there's a standard of what they're checking, what they're looking for, and so on. So the first advantage is, the first opportunity is the tremendous amount of information that was gathered and collected. The analysis of this information is of great value. Let me give you just one tiny example. Yesterday in the news here in Israel, Intel announced that it was investing $1 billion in purchasing an Israeli app called Move It, which is an Israeli app that basically looks at citywide mass transit systems and provides you information about when the bus is coming, when the train is coming. And the reason why Intel is doing that is to supplement a different purchase that they made of a company called Mobileye. And they're buying Move It because of the information, because of the data, and not because they're interested in operating Move It themselves.
So data becomes the key currency there, right? It's like data is the product. Data is the thing that drives, as marketers, right? It's the thing that it's the foundation to everything we do.
Right, because the end goal of everything that we do today in marketing is to be able to predict behavior. And because of the fact that this was the biggest experiment in the history of mankind, you had the entire population, the whole world, locked up for 6 to 8 weeks, and the connectivity became hyperconnectivity, right? You're talking about your mother. My mother is 88 years old. She all of a sudden had to learn how to operate Zoom, and she did it very successfully, and she spends hours every day online producing content, uploading content, participating in conversations. And all this provides marketers with an unprecedented degree of accuracy. And this has to be taken advantage of.
So Ido, thinking about the travel industry, I mean, look, you and I have traveled on business, right? It's like I've spent probably more time up in the air than I have on the ground, right? And I've spent more time in the last 20 years in foreign countries than I probably have my own. Yeah. And being an ambassador for your country, I'm sure that's the same for you. Do you think we'll ever travel internationally again? Or do you think that there's always going to be some form of social distancing, or there's going to be some impediment to travel for at least the foreseeable future? But some are saying the next 5 years. What are your thoughts on that, and what are your thoughts on how business can recover if it relied on international travel historically? What can it do today?
So hygiene and sanitation are going to be the new competitive advantage, and it will have to be visible, and it will have to be effective. That's the first thing. Secondly, general reputation will become more important than ever. So brands will have to engage in a proactive process of boosting and fortifying their brand reputation and their brand image, and more will have to be invested in marketing. And I know that CFOs and CEOs, their instinct in times of crisis is to cut the budget, and they usually cut the marketing budget first, and it's a big mistake. This is the time to invest in building your brand, and I think that this is very important. Now, in terms of travel, unfortunately, in my opinion, what COVID-19 crisis did, it made the weak weaker and the poor poorer. In other words, the gap between luxury travel and the rest is only going to get wider. And my prediction is that luxury travel will be the first to resume. Business travel will be damaged significantly because many businesses will come to the conclusion that most previous business travel was not essential. So only essential travel will be maintained. And the people that were hit hard economically and financially by this will basically won't travel for the foreseeable future just because they need to save money. They don't have those financial resources to travel the way they did before. And you're talking about countries that went from 5% unemployment to 30% unemployment within 8 weeks. You're talking about people that lost 25% of their pension within 2 weeks. So these are people that were hit hard. I don't see them traveling the same way, the same intensity like before. And it will take years for the industry, again, with the exception of luxury travel, it will take years for the industry to resume to the same level it was.
So just picking up on one of the points that you mentioned there, hygiene. I think that was the opening statements, like from the last couple of minutes, right? It's like for that question. It's like so if we just pick up on the hygiene element, and you said two things: it needs to be visible and effective, and that's personal hygiene or hygiene of the person, right? But that's also the same when we think about hygiene of the data, right? It's like that investment that Intel made, that example that you gave earlier on, where as marketers we talk about like data quality and data quantity. That's the same thing, is it not, Ido? It's like in so much as we need to ensure that we have services and technology built around creating the data as well as keeping it relevant, keeping it salient, keeping it cleansed,
and keeping it safe. And because people don't mind contributing their own personal information to the general conversation to make it better if they know that their privacy is not going to be compromised. It's no coincidence that the defining issue of our time is trust. And trust can predict the well-being of any brand. And so in order for brands that collect and analyze data to maintain a high level of trust, they have to stay true to their purpose. They have to be transparent. They have to be accountable. In other words, when they make a mistake, they have to admit it, and they have to be reliable. And I think that what happened to Zoom as a brand from the beginning of the crisis until now is a wonderful case study of how the fact that the system was compromised in a number of instances significantly damaged the reputation of the brand. And I think it's a perfect case study of what happened to Zoom in the last 8 weeks. They started very high, and they're not in the same place anymore.
Yep, no, all a fair point, Ido. So thinking of security, right? It's like that brings us back to opportunities and threats from the digitalization that we've seen over recent weeks. From a security perspective, being maybe the number one threat from that digitalization perspective, what other threats can you see to brands and to organizations from the rapid adoption of technology that we've seen over the last 5-6 weeks?
So obviously information overload is one of the biggest problems that brands and employers are going to face. The second thing is obviously long-term resilience, business capacities that will allow the business to be flexible, because we have to look at what happened in COVID-19 as a dress rehearsal for the real thing. COVID-19 is not, those of us who had seen the famous 2015 Bill Gates TEDx talk where he spoke about the virus, the next pandemic. This is not the pandemic, I believe, that he was referring to. This is luckily and thankfully only a dress rehearsal. So we have to look at this need of brands and marketers to adapt to the new reality by being more flexible, by allowing higher physical and conceptual mobility for their own staff, by listening to their own staff in the first place. So if one of the things that you're concerned with as a brand is threat forecast, and many brands that I know are willing to spend millions on outside advice and consultancies that will come and assess the threats. They can actually crop a lot of information from their own staff, and they just don't do it. It's a low-hanging fruit. Your people are the best people that will know where the threat will be coming from. And so the first thing I would say is information overload. Information overload is very dangerous. It's when your people are exposed either to too much information or information that is irrelevant for them to fulfill their jobs. It's a distraction. It heightens the level of anxiety, and it leads to a mistaken decision-making process. This could be very costly in terms of brands.
So, Ido, you mentioned earlier on as well that in times of crisis, when levels of uncertainty are at an all-time high, decision makers tend to cut budgets, and the very first victims to that are normally the marketing function when we're talking about a B2B organization, right? You mentioned, though, you said that that's a big mistake. Why is that a big mistake?
Because crisis is the time when you have to be proactive. It's a golden rule in crisis management, proactiveness. You have to be proactive. This is the time to do all the things that you were afraid to do and that you viewed them to be experimental or too expensive. This is the time to do that. Let me give you an example. So if I'm a mayor of my little hometown here in Israel, and I have to tell you, it's been unpleasant to walk streets of our little community because they're so dirty. So if I'm the mayor of my little hometown here, I would double and triple the size of the sanitation department. I will turn this community into the nicest, cleanest and most beautiful, most embellished community in the whole country, because that's the only way to get out of the crisis. Places like Tokyo that are known for their cleanliness are going to recuperate very, very quickly. Places that have a messy reputation will have an uphill battle. So the idea of using this time to invest in the well-being of your brand is not new in crisis management. There's time to do it. There'll be no other time. And the biggest mistake is to cut those budgets, because what it will do, it basically will allow the brand to struggle. Whereas you can use this moment to shine, to show that you're different, to put on display your relative advantages. Basically, this is the opportunity, and it's a rare opportunity. And I can give you many examples in the history of crisis management of how brands use crisis to emerge stronger and better.
Excellent. So, Ido, if you were to give the audience, the listeners, free tips, for ways to think about, breathing life or keeping that brand moving forward. I was going to say breathing life back into the brand, but let's not be that pessimistic, right? Let's assume that there's the brand is continuing forward. But if you were to give, free tips for managing a brand through a crisis, what would those free tips be?
To be relevant. See, there's a pandemic, there's a COVID-19 crisis, it's a public health issue. Try to find the relevant tie-in of your marketing efforts to the situation. Be relevant to the situation. That's the first tip. So it doesn't matter whatever field you're in, whether you're in selling internet software or in your education, or there's always an angle that you can actually create a relevant tie-in to the situation. Be relevant. That's the first advice that I can give. The second is, as I said before, maintain the highest levels of possible by making your purpose known to your client base, and secondly, stay true to that purpose. And then lastly, this is the time, and I think I published a piece about what we can learn from the marketing model of the Grateful Dead back in the 1970s. Try to create a fan base relationship. In other words, try to have the personal information of your customers. I know you're B2B, but B2B is your business model. In terms of marketing, we all need to think like B2C and behave like B2C. And I've been working with major credit card companies, and my advice to them was the same. You're B2B, but think and behave as if you're B2C, meaning you want to have the ability to communicate directly with your fan base, with the people that follow your brand, with the people that are dependent upon your brand. And we can learn a lot from music. And that was the article I published about what can we learn from the history of the Grateful Dead and the way that they bypassed the intermediaries and communicated directly with their fan base.
Excellent. That's wonderful advice, Ido. So I've got one question for you as well. It's like, what do you see the future workforce or workplace looking like once we come out of the back of this pandemic?
So I think gig economy is the future, and COVID-19 made sure that we all understand the future is now. So the future of work will have to be dependent upon adaptability, flexibility, and the ability of marketers and brands to deploy across sectors. So, for example, if you're from the hospitality industry, to be able to deploy people that have no jobs right now to work in, let's say, the hospital industry and the healthcare industry and so on. I think that the future of work is going to be in the hands of freelancers. Outsourcing is going to be the new buzzword. I think that companies and brands will try to minimize the expense on overhead by relying more and more on freelancers. And I think that's the future of workforce.
Thank you, Ido. So to sum it up, what I'm taking away from this, right, is that trust has always been key, right? You earn trust in drips, and you lose it when if someone kicks that bucket over, right? But trust is key. Keep true to your brand. Yeah, transparency helps with that trust. Accountability and reliability are key things, is what you said. But then, to me, you really summed it up at the end when you said, think and behave. Yeah, even though we're B2B marketers and sales professionals, think and behave as if we were B2C. Think of your fan base, or as I tell people, think of your tribe, right? It's about creating the tribe, yeah, and using the tribe effect. And no better channel than to do that is through social media, right, Ido?
Absolutely. And by the way, I always urge my friends to look at the performance of the governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo, and to learn from him how he was able to take this crisis and turn it into an opportunity to build a pristine political brand. And we know that the level of trust that politicians earn is close to zero in the world. But Andrew Cuomo, because he was able to stay true to his purpose, he was transparent. He gave people the feeling that he feels them. He spoke to them. He wasn't patronizing. He was straightforward. He told them the truth. They felt he was telling them the truth. He didn't try to beautify and sugarcoating everything. And so he's being rewarded right now as perhaps the most solid political brand in the United States today is the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. And if he wanted to run to become the president, this could be the event that changed his political career, the course of his political career. So we can all learn a great deal from all the right things that Andrew Cuomo did during the crisis.
Excellent. Some sage advice there. Ido, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining the conversation today. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.